obviously did not take Uber coming here. Came in a few minutes late. If I don't make any sense tonight, I'm going to blame it on the microphone, just like Mr. Trump. So, unfortunately, though, they just fixed it. You took away my alibi. But I am honored to be here with you this afternoon to discuss these issues that are not really academic or theoretical, but have real practical consequences on our lives, really on the lives of all Americans. I would like to attempt to answer the questions posed in the small paragraph on the flyer, to be able to directly address the issues. And to begin with, the first line, Muslims are a very small minority of 5 to 6 million. I want to stop there for a second and pose a question. What does a minority mean in this context? If we're talking about the religious makeup of America, certainly Muslims are a minority amongst several minorities. Jews are a minority, Baha'is are a minority, etc. If we're talking about Americans, period, I have an issue with that. I don't think of myself as a minority when it comes to being American. Because the way I define American is in a singular fashion across all communities. It is the relationship of the citizen of this country to the state, to the government, to the population, to the country, to the land. It is an identity that shouldn't be colored. When I go to vote, for example, I don't have a special booth that says Muslim on it. I vote in the same way, based on the same issues that are out there. Obviously, there's individuality. It is colored by my religion. It is colored by my being of Egyptian origin. It is colored by me liking soccer more than football. It is colored by all sorts of specifics. Religion is one of them. But to have that as sort of the masthead, the headline of my identity when it comes to my relationship to the state is problematic. That is not how I think of it myself. But oftentimes, the hyphenation, which is reserved for anybody who isn't a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant American, puts us in these little sort of boxes, and we're supposed to operate within these boxes, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The fact of the matter is, even when we're talking about Muslim issues, there is a huge contradiction between public perception and the reality, the self-identity of Muslims in this country. For example, I've been on many shows, 99% of the time, to analyze and react and talk about acts of terrorism, about ISIS, before that Al-Qaeda, maybe a couple of people in San Bernardino I've never heard of, somebody in France or Holland I've never heard of. And it would seem that this relationship between myself and these acts are inherent or daily. But in reality, I don't wake up in the morning and go to the breakfast table and say, hey, Mom, what's going on with ISIS today? What's new? What's up with al-Baghdadi? It's not an issue that dominates my daily life. I don't wake up in the morning thinking about it. I don't go to bed thinking about it. But suddenly, I have to play the part. I've been cast in the great soap opera that sometimes we call America, and I have to play that part. But now, after many years of doing it, I've found that it isn't good enough to say the right things within the wrong frame. It isn't good enough to come out and say, we're not all terrorists, which should go without saying. It isn't good enough to come out and say, we condemn ISIS, should go without saying, should be assumed unless otherwise stated, not the other way around. It's not good enough to throw out some statistics and some facts, some anecdotes, and remain within that frame that pits me against the wall. What I like to do now is to question the frame itself. The last time I was on television, I answered all the questions, but pursuant to my new strategy, I had to question the anchor and say, look, I'm happy to answer the questions about ISIS, but when are you going to invite me here to talk about the realities of my day-to-day life and my community's day-to-day life? We're not invited for a conversation on healthcare, even though we're 1% of the American population and 10% of its doctors. We're overrepresented in the medical field 1,000%. But we're not thought of that way. We're not invited to that table or to that conversation. And even now, the best I can hope for is to be the activist that fights Islamophobia. No, thank you. That's too low a bar. It's not good enough to spend my life trying to tell you I'm normal. And then hopefully you accept that and I've won. It's like clawing away to get to ground zero. I have higher ambitions than that. My parents invested in me to be better than that. I love this country far too much to settle for that. The issues that concern me as I watch these debates aren't just me, or how these people, these couple of candidates, feel about me and my religion. But I'm also very concerned about their honesty levels, their transparency, the moral fabric of their character. Because my country will be entrusted in their hands. With it, everything, not just the relationship between them and me, which I'm strong enough to fight back on and even win, I believe. But I don't have that same trust when it comes to what they'll do with the economy, or what they'll do with community relations, or what they'll do with foreign policy and our standing in the world, with our military, with our young men and women who go out to serve in the military. They do their jobs, but do the people who send them do their jobs is a big question. These are issues that concern me, and I won't apologize for it. I won't cover that up. I won't just play the part of the extra that's supposed to be limited to what others want me to dance around and jump up and down in. It's like a circus act. And I think this frustration, which I hope I'm able to convey to you, is represented by the majority of the young Muslims in this country. And I would say young blacks, and young Latinos, and young everything else we have called minorities. As a matter of fact, many in the white communities of America may feel that way because they don't buy into the idea of majority versus minority. They have individualism, they have their own ideas. They may feel as a minority the way we talk about minorities in the music they listen to, in the social clique that they fit in, etc. So it's time that we don't think of ourselves in terms of these categories, these very arbitrary categories. I never understood race, to be honest with you. I understand the history of race and why that's important today. But the idea that we must classify people according to pigmentation, how is that functional? Does that really affect how smart you are, how successful you are, how honest you are? Does it decide for you which party or which football team or which school you go to? Why not nose size or foot size or height? Why don't we start creating human categories based on these arbitrary values? Again, I understand the idea of a cultural history and an ethnic history, a continental history that binds certain people together, but that's for them to celebrate in the way that they deem fit. It's not for others to put them in a box by, or for me to do that with you. We celebrate that diversity. We all come from somewhere. We all have something unique to us. There's nothing wrong with that. But to put someone down or to classify someone in a corner as a result of that one thing is highly problematic. And so the idea of minority, I must question, because when I go to the voting booth, I don't go as a minority. I go as a majority of one. It's called American. Now, that obviously answers the other question, what kind of political beliefs do Muslims have? All sorts. I'd like to say, or I'd like to believe that for us, we do have an agenda in this country. And if I were to look at all of the various, very diverse things that we engage in and are concerned with, I could probably pack them all in a box called social justice. We have a social justice agenda. That's what concerns us about Palestine. It isn't ethnic or racial or religious supremacy or rooting for a particular team along those lines, but rather social justice, opposing an occupation, opposing human rights abuses, etc. It is what motivates us to stand up and rally and protest and create organizations against human rights abuses of dictators in the Middle East, where many of us happen to have immigrated from. It is what makes us stand up for Burma, but also Rwanda. It is what makes us stand up for Syria and for Syria to be an issue, the greatest human rights catastrophe since World War II. It is what concerns us about the fake or the false or the war based on a lie, the war in Iraq, and the tremendous cost that that incurred in terms of lives, money, history, relations that occurred thereafter. It is what concerns us about Black Lives Matter as a movement domestically, about homelessness, about crime on the streets, about police abuse where that occurs. All of these things are kind of messy when you try to think of them as one category, except when you think of social justice. That is our agenda. And it's not a surprise because that is what we're taught within our religious circles. That is what we believe our prophet stood for. Now, if I bring that as an agenda to this country, I think that's okay. And I know that others do as well, motivated by other backgrounds, other great leaders in history, whether religious or otherwise, maybe contemporary, as I am motivated by many, from Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Gandhi, etc. So, to however have to be invited into places and supposedly play the part of the Muslim who comes from this area with this way of thinking and these flag colors, who takes this belief over that belief, etc., is just not the way you ought to understand who we are, because that's not the way we self-identify. We're a diverse community, and our main agenda is social justice. Beyond that, pretty much anything goes. You have liberals, you have conservatives, you have religious, you have non-religious, you have women in the hijab, you have women who wear short skirts, you have men in beards, you have guys who shave their heads and their faces. You have people who listen to rock, people who listen to classical music, people who listen to beautiful music from Pakistan or India or Egypt, etc. There's really very little that you can put all Muslims in one category and say Muslim, other than the social justice and the fact that we share a faith. So if we begin to understand that, that automatically addresses the other question and the other issues that my esteemed colleagues brought up, Islamophobia, for example, which is based on the false assumption that if one Muslim does something, usually bad, not good, because if that one Muslim found a cure for cancer, that will not be generalized. But if one Muslim commits a crime, whether as a lone wolf, which is increasingly the case, especially in this country, or whether it's part of an organized criminal movement, and that's what I call ISIS, that's what I call Al-Qaeda. It's an organized criminal movement. It's organized crime. Then all Muslims are brought into the fold, and I'm brought on to answer for that, and to explain that, and to shed light on that. Even though I woke up in the morning and saw it on CNN just like everybody else. My jaw dropped just like everybody else. Suddenly, I'm supposed to be imbued with special abilities and talents to understand what this guy, thousands of miles away did and why he did it. We need to break this way of thinking. There's a lot more in common between us as human beings than there is between a human like myself and a criminal organized movement I've never heard of except through the television set. And I will not play the part anymore. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed, Nizam, and Saeed. It was very helpful to kind of go around like that, and I think we need to go around again. There's so much more to discuss. At this time, I think we'd like to start a question and answer session.
Before we move to Q&A, I just wanted to recognize one person in the audience. Now, you are all very special people. You all need to be recognized. But we have our friend and this college's friend, Dr. Azra Haq. She's sitting here at front. Today is a very special day for her because her son Ahmad, whom we know as child, playing in this neighborhood, today he became colonel in U.S. Army. And Ahmad is neurosurgeon. And you can go and Google how much money they make if they are in civil public life. But he chose to serve U.S. Army, saving the life of those who are fighting on our behalf. In past few years, Imad has been in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, in Niger, and in Somalia. The countries we will not dare to go nearby. But he is fulfilling his responsibility and call of duty. And there are 10,000 Muslim soldiers in U.S. Army. So we want to thank her and Imad for the work they do on our behalf. Thank you.